So, when you think of someone who's highly intelligent, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Perfect grades? Maybe someone who has a lightning-fast answer for everything? Well, what if I told you that for a lot of people, it looks nothing like that? Actually, it often shows up in these daily patterns and habits that, others might find a little weird. Let's get into it.
Seriously, what if all those little quirks you've had your whole life, the things that maybe make you feel a bit out of sync with everyone else, what if they're actually signs of a super efficient brain hard at work? Today, we're going to dig into the psychology behind these habits and maybe start seeing them not as flaws, but as features.
All right, first up, let's talk about the stuff that happens inside your head. Or, sometimes just outside of it. This is all about how your brain chews on things, organizes information, and solves problems way before anyone else even sees what you're doing. Okay, be honest. Do you ever find yourself talking out loud when nobody's around? Maybe you're walking yourself through a tough problem at work, step by step, or you're debating the pros and cons of a decision with yourself. It might feel a little strange, but what you're actually doing is using a really powerful mental tool. See, this isn't just some random chatter. It's a process called metacognition, basically thinking about your own thinking. When you talk it out, you're pretty much laying all your thoughts out on a table so you can actually look at them. It helps you clear out all that mental clutter and lets you spot a flaw in your own logic way faster than if you kept it all bottled up inside.
All right, how about this one? You're in a meeting, or maybe you're just doing the dishes, and you suddenly realize you've totally zoned out. To anyone else, it probably looks like you're bored out of your mind, but inside your head, something pretty incredible is actually going on.
This is your brain's default mode network kicking into high gear. When you're not actively focused on something in the outside world, this network just lights up. Think of it as your brain's creative engine. It starts connecting ideas that seem totally unrelated and works on problems in the background. You know that brilliant aha moment you have in the shower? Yeah, you can thank this network for that.
And that leads us to another habit that gets a really bad rap: procrastination. You've got a huge project due, but instead of diving right in, you just don't. You do other things, you think about other things. It looks like you're ignoring it, but you're really not.
So what's really happening here is not procrastination. It's something called cognitive incubation. You're basically letting your subconscious mind just simmer on the problem, kind of cooking the idea. So when you finally do sit down to work, the solution feels like it just pours out of you, almost fully formed. It's a way more efficient use of your brain's power than you'd think. Now this is really interesting. On one hand, you have the person who needs total silence to get anything done. That's because their brain might have what's called low latent inhibition. It takes in everything. Every little hum, tap, and whisper is a distraction. But on the other hand, you've got the person whose desk looks like a total disaster zone. That's not laziness, it's heuristic prioritization. Their brain has decided its limited energy is better spent solving a complex problem than on tidying up. These two habits seem like polar opposites, but they're both just different strategies for managing mental load.
Do you find those casual little chats about the weather or what you did over the weekend to be just completely draining? You'd probably much rather have one deep, meaningful conversation than go to a party filled with all that light, surface-level stuff.
A lot of times, this comes down to something called cortical arousal. Your brain is already running at a super high level of stimulation, just by default. Small talk forces it to process a bunch of, let's be honest, often uninteresting social data, which can push it right into overstimulation and burnout. It's not about being antisocial, it's about mental self-preservation. For our final section, let's look at the hidden systems, the deep internal logic that shapes how you deal with information, how you handle mistakes, and even how you manage time itself. So, someone asks you a question, and instead of answering right away, you just pause. For a few seconds, it's completely silent. Now, this can make other people think you're unsure, or maybe that you didn't even hear them. But actually, the exact opposite is true.
That pause? It's a sign of high inhibitory control. In that brief moment, your brain is firing off multiple potential answers, and it's rapidly evaluating every single one for accuracy and nuance. It's suppressing the good enough answers to find the best one. So it's not a sign of hesitation. It's a sign of precision.
Think about what happens when you make a mistake. Do you get defensive, or do you find yourself talking about it with this weirdly detached, clinical honesty, breaking down exactly what went wrong and why? This is a perfect example of something called cognitive decoupling. It's the ability to separate your ego from your actions. The mistake isn't you, it's just a data point. And by analyzing it objectively, you can learn from it and make the system better for next time. Failure stops being an identity and starts being a tool. Do your best ideas always seem to show up late at night? While the rest of the world is sleeping, you suddenly feel this huge surge of creativity and clarity. Trying to be productive at 8 a.m. just feels impossible.
Well, there's a really cool theory for this called the evolutionary novelty hypothesis. The idea is that people who are wired to stay alert during the quieter, less distracting nighttime hours might have been more open to new ideas and novel situations. That quiet allows your brain to explore paths it can't during the noisy chaos of the day. And finally, do you have these really specific, particular systems for things other people don't even think twice about? Maybe it's how you organize your phone apps by color, or the single most efficient way to load the dishwasher.
This is your brain's systematizing mechanism in action. It's constantly trying to figure out the underlying rules of any system, whether it's a conversation, a project, or a kitchen chore, so it can optimize it for maximum efficiency. It's this fundamental drive to just make things work better.
So when you put all of these pieces together, a really clear picture starts to emerge. These aren't just a random collection of quirks, right? They're the visible signs of a brain that is operating on its own consistent internal logic.
So what's the common thread through all of this? Well, whether it's talking to yourself to get your thoughts straight, or having a messy desk to save mental energy, or pausing to find the most accurate answer, all these habits point to a brain that consistently prioritizes clarity and effective problem solving over just conforming to what's considered normal. And that really brings us to the final question. As you look back on these habits, the inner monologue, the way you control your environment, these hidden systems, which of these cognitive signatures do you recognize in your own life? Because what seems weird to other people might just be your brain's most logical and efficient way of getting things done.